tonight. I know it's been a very busy news cycle, lots of news happening across the country. So we want to jump right into this webinar on becoming a change agent. My name is Aaron Day. I am a supervising producer at KCPQ in Seattle, the Fox O&L station here in Seattle. And so I'm happy to bring this webinar to you. It's going to be fun. It's going to be very candid. It's about becoming a change agent. And before I jump into what we're going to talk about today, I want to introduce our panelists. First, we have Kerwin. Kerwin is in New York. Kerwin, go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone.
Sure. My name is Kerwin Spate. I am Dayside Executive Producer at WPIX TV, also known as Pix11. I'm responsible for all of our Dayside newscasts, a little bit of digital, and then also some of our change efforts here in the newsroom. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kerwin. We have Shalita Hurd. She's dialing in right now. She'll be popping up her video in a moment here, but she can hear us. She can take our questions. Shalita, tell us what you do at WSB.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shalita. As Aaron said, I am the 4 p.m. producer here at WSB TV in Atlanta, and I am responsible for everything that comes on at 4 o'clock. And yeah, I happen to have worked with Kerwin and know Aaron, so I'm really excited about tonight's webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Shalita. One of the just so if you haven't read the flyer, if you haven't read the information about this change agent webinar, it's pretty much about how to instigate, how to initiate, how to implement change in your newsroom from anywhere on the organizational chart. I've been producing for a long time, as our panelists have, and we just thought it was a very good idea to go over some best practices for how to implement small changes, big changes. Where do you start? How do you navigate your newsroom to make your voice heard? And so what I want to start with is just an overview. I'm going to share my screen here first before I jump into some questions, because I think it's important can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I just came up with 2 definitions because I think we should define what a change agent is. And the first one here is a person or a group who carries out the task of instigating and managing change in an organization, someone who directly or indirectly influences change. And then number 2, a change agent is a person from within the organization or someone who's brought from the outside who also helps bring about transformation through focus on effectiveness, improvement, so on and so forth. And so my first question to the panel is, let me get to my questions here. Let's just jump right into it, Kerwin. What is the first step to becoming a change agent in your newsroom? What do you recommend, whether you're an experienced or a new journalist in this business? What's the first step to becoming a person who can bring about change in your newsroom?
Well, I think the first thing is recognizing that there needs to be change, that something isn't working, or there's a problem, or there's something that's missing, or there's a system that doesn't go right. And you, as a producer, as a writer, as an anchor, anybody, you recognize this doesn't work, this doesn't make sense. I think that we need to do it differently. So I think that's the first part is recognizing that there is a need for change.
Shalita?
Yes, I totally agree with Kerwin, recognizing that there is a need for change. And then also, so not just recognizing that there is a need for change, but also having a solution, because everybody can recognize a problem, but what is the solution and how can we make this happen? And how can we make this happen with the staff we have? Because as we know, newsrooms are, we're doing more with less. And so how can we, go about making these changes happen effectively with the staff we have in place?
I was just going to ask that question. It's one thing to recognize what needs to happen, right? We need to add more staff, or we need to, rewrite job descriptions, or, so where do you go from there once you recognize, okay, this is not working in my newsroom, this is not working for the show? Where do you go from there, Kerwin?
So there are a couple of different methodologies about going about it. One is the change that kind of needs to happen quickly in an emergency situation, and so it is, gathering a group around and saying, "Hey guys, that didn't work," right? Or "Hey guys, we went to black on air. Here's the change. Period. Right? Here's standing operating procedure." That's one way. And then there is another method, and I'm going to call on the name of John Cotter, who has studied change and leadership and management organizations, and he has an 8-step process when going about change. And I'll kind of summarize that process, but a little bit of it is recognizing the problem, finding your champions, so finding other people on your team to agree with you that yes, this needs to change. You build a vision, you roll it out, and then you monitor it. You praise, "Hey, great job on doing this differently," or "Great job on doing the change that we set out to do." And you reassess it. Did we reach our goals? Are we becoming more effective by this change? And then you make it stick. So when people start to backslide, no, remember, we don't do that anymore. We do it this way. So that's kind of the long version, of the next step.
Yeah. Shalita, what do you think about what's the next step after you recognize a need for change? What's the next step in the process, in your opinion?
Also, just piggybacking off Kerwin, when you recognize that there is a need for change, gathering others in the newsroom, especially if you're new or you don't have the boldness to speak up, going to others who can be in your corner, talking to them like, "Hey, this is what I noticed. I think ABC would be better. What do you think?" So getting the opinions of others in the newsroom, I think that would definitely help, because maybe this change has been tried before and it was ineffective. So, hearing from others who have been in the newsroom, I think, would definitely be a next step. And then, looking to see, who do I go to, if they say, "Okay, this is great, this is, awesome. Okay, well, who do I go to now to make sure that we are able to implement this new procedure or suggest this new procedure to make things go a lot smoother?"
Great, thank you. Hey, real quick, Shalita, can you mute your phone, by the way?
Yes, absolutely.
Just
Let me
because
see.
yeah, well, thank you. By the way, if you are watching this webinar or listening to it, we are taking questions throughout the entire hour. So if you want to post a question, I'm checking the Q&A section here. You do not have to wait until the end to ask a question. So I just need to make sure that people are aware that they can ask questions throughout this entire hour. I want to pop up another slide here because it is from a textbook that I've read, and it shows the some characteristics of change agents. And so let me just pop this up real quick for all of you. Hopefully you can see this. Can you all see that? Can you see that, Kerwin?
Yes.
So this is an entire slideshow that I have. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I just want to jump to this list here. The essential change agent characteristics. We have commitment to improvement. We have communication, interpersonal skills. We have determination. We have eyes on the prize and flexibility, experience in networks, and intelligence. I want to zero in on the interpersonal skills part and the communication part of this list here because I've worked with lots of people who are committed to improving. You know, they want to get better. If getting video back to the newsroom is becoming more difficult, how can we get better technology to get that video on TV better? Whatever the case may be, but what role does interpersonal skills and networks play in becoming an effective change agent? Because some of the most committed people may fail at their ideas. So, Kerwin, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, interpersonal skills are key, right? Because especially in newsrooms, when you have groups of people who are often type A, groups of people who are often competitive, you know, who know it all, you know, or have tons of experience in the market, necessarily don't want to change, right? They're happy doing what they are doing or what they've been doing. So that interpersonal skills, having the ability to move your folks who might be crunchy, you know, and might be set and have their heels dug in with doing things a certain way. It is being able to not necessarily suck up to them, but how to develop a rapport with them to really get them to wrap their mind around why this change is important, you know, how the change can help us be successful. You know, I think, you know, interpersonal skills is just one thing that you definitely need kind of anywhere you work, but especially in the newsroom when you have so many different types of personalities.
Shalita, same question for you. I mean, another way to put the question is when everything is the status quo, right? I mean, there are newsrooms out there where it's been the same system, the same thing for years, and people don't want to change, right? You just got hired, or you've been there a couple of years, and you just think there's a faster, more efficient way to put content on air or online. How can interpersonal skills and networks help with that effort for someone?
Well, I think you just have to go about it in a way that doesn't rock the boat while rocking the boat, if that makes sense. You know, dealing with people who have done it one way the entire time, they do get set in their ways. But I think if you approach it from a perspective not like, okay, well, I'm coming in and I'm ready to make some changes and what you have done hasn't worked and blah, 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 you know, because that will rub people the wrong way. But if you come in, hey, you know, I was thinking that, you know, just from a more humble, with humility. Does that make sense? A more instead of like just coming in and telling people, hey, you've done it this way, you know, there's a better way, and I want to show you. As a new person, you're going to come off wrong. So those interpersonal skills are so necessary, because if somebody has been in this position and they have done it this way for a very long time, they're not ready to change. So you have to just come in a way that doesn't seem pushy. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the back piece of that is, you know, and this is a piece of interpersonal skills. You got to have buy-in, right? And so you have that. You have
absolutely
skills that to be able to create buy-in, even from the people who are okay with the status quo, and those who have done it, you know, a specific way for a long period of time and have been successful at it, right? But it just might not be the most efficient. So, you know, you have to really, you know, get that buy-in, you know, from enough people in order to help make the change happen and to make the change stick.
I want to pop up. I do have a couple of case studies I'd like to share with you in a moment here, but I want to stick to some of the theory and research here that I think applies to a newsroom. And there are 4 different types of change agents that I'd like for the attendees to take a look at. So give me a moment. Let me share my screen here. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here. So can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I'm just going to go through these 4 types of change agents, and I'd love for you. I know, Shalitha, you're still listening, so I'll make sure I read this very clearly. I'm going to go through the 4 of these, and I would love for each of you to just give me your take on which one is best for a newsroom, or is it a combination of 2, or or none of them. So the first type of change agent is the emotional champion. This person has a very clear and powerful vision of what the newsroom needs. They use that vision to capture hearts and motivation. So this person needs, the newsroom needs an emotional champion when there's a dramatic shift in the environment, so on and so forth, right? So we have that person. We also have what we call the intuitive adapter. This person has a clear vision for the newsroom, uses that vision to reinforce culture of learning and adaptation. We have the developmental strategist. This person applies rational analysis to understanding the competitive logic. I would probably say this person is more in tune with the environment of the news business, what the competition's doing. Are we no longer, operating in the best interest of the viewer, and so on and so forth, right? So this person seeks to alter the structure and process. And then we have people who are just trying to continuously improve, right? How can we get photographers out the newsroom a little bit faster? How can we make the morning meeting a little bit more productive? How can we get our writers and editors and whoever to move a little quicker? And so just looking at these different types of agents, and you're more than welcome to add a 5th if you want. Is there one that you lean towards that is probably best for a newsroom, or is there a combination of them?
I'd probably say there's a combination, right? I mean, because probably each one of these type of change agents exists in a newsroom somewhere in the management structure, right? So somebody is constantly looking at the numbers, right? And somebody is constantly, as you said, looking at getting crews out of the door faster. And somebody to some degree has to be the gatekeeper and the emotional one, who plays pulls the heartstrings of people to get them to do things. I remember I had a news director, who I love dearly, but when she would march out into the newsroom and start preaching and giving her colloquialisms, that made people in that newsroom, kind of fall in line, if you will. And I worked in other newsrooms where it's been straight run and gun. Do it. Here's what we're doing. So I really think that, each one of these has a place, and I don't necessarily think that there's just one, but it really depends on the newsroom, right? I mean, it really depends on the room, and kind of the personalities that are involved. That kind of determines which one of those change agents is probably best. But I would say it's probably a combination of all of those.
Shalitha, did you catch that?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with her. When you need a combination of them all to really, impact change, because then the people who are in the newsroom, they respond differently. So while you may have the one who pulls at the heartstring of people, you also need, a little bit of the person who's just like, get it done. This is what I say, get it done. So I agree that each person, each attitude is necessary to have change in the newsroom. I feel like I'm more of an emotional person, so I lean towards, okay, you know, this is the why we're doing this. This is how it's going to help. This is, you know, okay, I'm on board. I'm on board. I don't necessarily respond, you know, just like, okay, get it done. This is, and that's that. I have questions. So I think you need a little bit of both, and you have to have a little bit of both in a newsroom to effectively affect change.
Shalita, I want to stick with you here, okay? We have a question from Jillian Marsh. She says, my name is Jillian. I'm a news video editor. I worked at my job for about 2 years. How do I suggest that editors need improved training when starting the job? So what do you recommend Jillian do or say to help the training process for new editors at her station? Any thoughts on that?
Great question, Jillian. 2 years, that's new, but not really new. It's long enough to see what needs to happen and what changes need to be made. So I would suggest you going to your superior and saying, hey, you know, there are things that we can do better, point out what needs to be done, and then have the solutions. Okay, we can, you know, go to these trainings. They offer them. You can look some trainings up, NABJ training, whatever city, your local NABJ chapter, they may have training. So go with the solution in hand to your superior and say, hey, I believe that we can do this better. This is why, because if we are able to, you know, have this training for this, we're able to get the video on faster. We're able to, you know, send the video to the field a little bit, you know, faster or whatever. But go with not only this is the issue that I'm seeing, but the solution, and here are the training opportunities. You know, maybe even the company offers different training opportunities. So go with a solution, a list of solutions to help with that. And I think that, you know, do it just with you and your boss by yourself, not in front of a whole bunch of people, because you never want to make someone feel like, oh, okay, well, she's talking about me, or she, you know, I'm not doing my job. Well, she just got here 2 years ago. But if you go in and you and your boss talk without pointing out anyone, just saying, hey, overall, we can do this, I think that will work.
Kerwin, what do you think? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, Kerwin.
Can you repeat the question one more time for me?
Yeah. So Jillian is a news editor at her station. She's been there for about 2 years, and she's wondering how can she suggest that editors get better training when they start. I'm guessing people are having a rough start once they get hired there, and she's just wondering how can they get better training. What can she do to help that?
Okay, so I think a couple of things, Jillian. You know, I would say one, you know, what does the training look like, right? You know, is it? And that's one of the conversations that we're having now about new people who start. Is we show them how to do it, and then we're like, okay, do it, right? Versus really taking the time on the front end to give them 2 weeks of time to really understand the systems and to really understand how to do it before we, quote unquote, throw them in the fire. So that's the first thing I would say is look at what the training, what does it look like, right? Is it actually, is it kind of watching somebody edit, or is it editing to see what it looks like? And then I think it sounds like in the process now, editors aren't getting trained enough, or it isn't sufficient enough, and it's probably showing up on air. Right, so that is an opportunity when a VO isn't cut long enough, or you know, some of the myriad problems that you might have with something that isn't cut properly. Then that's an opportunity to not necessarily embarrass the employee, but you know, take that to your supervisor to say, hey, you know, here was a VO that was cut for the 5 o'clock news today, and I think it's a direct effect, a direct result of not having enough training. So that might also be a way of getting some of that change, is to point it out in the moment or after the show. And then what I would do is I would create a training program. right, on your own and say, hey, here's what I recommend that we give all people who are coming in because they need to know X, Y, and Z, and the last couple of folks haven't had that. So that's the solution piece that Shalita talked about, right? If the training isn't sufficient enough and you recognize that it's not long enough or they aren't getting to enough of the nitty gritty, create a training program, like outline it, day 1, day 2, day 3, and by the end of the week, here are the things that all the new editors should know how to do based on, the kind of the situations you're in, whether you have to treat video, or whether video comes in late, and it barely makes the top of the show. I would kind of outline all that stuff so that you can go to your supervisor and say, hey, I recognize this problem. It comes from not enough training, and here's what I recommend. I recommend more days. I recommend more intensive X, Y, and Z. I recommend various shifts, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, that's all very good. I would also just maybe add, Jillian, that consider the relationship you have with your current manager. Just going back to interpersonal and networks, who in the newsroom, do you connect with, and who can you communicate with more, more comfortably, and maybe that could be a person to start with. I have another scenario here, Kerwin, for you. I'll start with Kerwin, then go to Shalita. Tyra is a reporter in Bakersfield at the CBS affiliate. She says she's been pitching ideas to her newsroom that she thinks will make the content and presence better,
okay,
in the market stronger. So she's been pitching ideas to help make the shows better. What is your advice on becoming a change agent and making sure that her ideas are carried out in a smaller market where there are fewer resources?
So
ideas, it sounds like she's not being heard.
Okay, so a couple things, right? So here's a high level look at it. What is your station's strategic approach, right? What is your station's standpoint in the market? If your station is hard news, breaking news, run and gun, then the features probably won't make it, right? So I would say, look at the stories that you are pitching and how do they fit into the mission of the organization, right? So I think that's the first piece. I think the second piece is, if you're constantly pitching things, pull the decision makers to the side, right? And say, and I wouldn't necessarily do this in the middle of the morning meeting, but to say, hey, I've been pitching all these stories. I think they're great. You don't like them. What is it? And sometimes it might be, they might not be day of stories, they might be video poor, and some people can't see beyond, okay, if there's not video, it's not a TV story. So I think there are some secondary questions that you've got to ask, your producers and your managers to really figure out why they aren't taking your ideas. And then I would also say, look at the pitch. Sometimes the pitch just might not be great. Right? It might be a great story, but you aren't pitching it well. So those are all things that I would say to take a look at. And if you kind of do one of those three things, you'll probably get a better idea of why your stories aren't getting through.
Shalita, what are your thoughts on how Tyra can help her story ideas get through at the station?
I have to agree, especially with Kerwin's number 2, because this happens in newsrooms all over the country. Tyra, you're not alone. There are reporters who make pitches, and they just don't quite fit. So I would agree that you should pull your a producer or your news director just to the side to say, hey, what is it about the pitches that just aren't fitting? What should I be going for? Since these have not been done, is there a particular area that I should be looking in, or, just to get a better idea of what their expectation is. So I think definitely that number 2, pulling people to the side to see, okay, if this is not working, then what should I be doing?
Yeah, I want to go back to one of the slides I just showed here, and this might help Tyra as well. Um, here, the different change types. Um, maybe Tyra, you need to. I don't know if you're pitching based on a hunch, or maybe maybe you're being an emotional champion. I don't know. I don't know you. I'm not there. But maybe your station, or maybe the people in your newsroom, maybe you should be a strategist in this case. Maybe you need to provide some logic. I mean, does the station have a set of values, or what is the mission? I mean, do your ideas center or advance the mission of the shows, of the newsroom? It's a lot hard to disagree with what the station is standing for versus what you think should happen, or a hunch of what you think is good. So maybe you could consider applying some rationale, or some logic about where your ideas fit into the newsroom's strategy going forward. So that's just something else to think about. Anything else you want to add, Karen?
Also, I'm sorry. May I add this? And looking big picture, because sometimes we see a story, we think it affects, it affects this community. We should be doing this. It's a community story, blah, 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 blah. But is it really big picture? Is it just, will the entire segment of the population who watches us, will they understand it? Will it benefit everybody? Or is it just really just benefiting a small portion of, our audience? So looking big picture, that will help as well.
Kerwin, is it ever okay to just move on and just say, forget it, I'm done? I don't want to, I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of talking to these people. You know how you get like that sometimes, right? You get deflated, you get discouraged. Is it okay to move on, or do you just?
I think if it is something that you feel passionate about, it is okay to temporarily move on, right? I mean, there are a number of things here, that I felt since I started that this does not make sense, right? We need to do this differently, and I finally had to say, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stop bringing this up in meetings, right? I'm gonna stop bringing it up in meetings. And fortunately, in this one situation in particular, it showed up again, and I was like, that's why. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. That's why we need to change this process and this system, and we're currently in the process of doing that. So I would say, if you feel passionate about it, you might have to temporarily give it up, because, some people might think, oh my God, he's a bulldog. He will not let that go. He will not let it go. So if you feel that passionate about it, you might need to let it go for a bit. But if it's that important, I think you look at other avenues and other ways, of getting your point across, or to make this change happen.
Shalitha, what are your thoughts on it? When should you give up, if you should give up at all, on your ideas?
I say, yes, there is a point, as Carla mentioned, because at some point, some people are just tired of hearing you talk. They don't want to hear you keep bringing up the same issues. So, sometimes you may have to back away. But I'll take, for example, since I am a producer, I had a problem with going to our 2:00 meeting because it was long, it was drawn out. My show comes on at 4:00. We got to get it done. And, it was too much. So we've had several producer meetings, and I brought it up several times. Okay, we need to have fewer meetings that I'm a part of because my show comes on at 4:00. 4:00, I got to be in that booth. We got to have a show. So all of these meetings is taking, precious time away from me getting everything done. And eventually, it took a few times, but eventually we were able to get that done where I don't go to a meeting. So I think if you're passionate about it, you say it, you share it, you bring it up. But sometimes you just have to learn not to beat a dead horse. Is that it? You know, just kind of back up and just, all right, it'll get done eventually, because we're going to keep running into the same issues.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've learned in my experience is that when you're right, you be quiet, and then when you're wrong, you admit it. And the more you pitch ideas, the more you make suggestions on how to improve things in your newsroom. If people do the opposite and it doesn't work out, that might give you another opening to making your voice heard again. So yeah, I think backing off is okay, but just maybe, observing where there's another opening in the future, possibly. That might be something worth considering as well. Let me see if there are any more questions here before I do something else here. Okay, I have my own scenarios. I kind of wrote up a couple of scenarios here that I'd love for the two of you to weigh in on. I mean, it's not terribly long, but I wrote this to give us some practical discussions here. It says here, the digital team in your newsroom is short-staffed. They're worried about filling positions. The digital team needs help posting stories to the website and social media. They're kind of concerned that they might get behind until they fill these positions. So a web producer wants the assignment desk, producers, and talent to help post stories to the website and social media. Now, most of you are probably saying, well, that happens already in my newsroom. But let's just assume that that's not happening in this particular case. What would be an effective strategy for this web producer to solicit help from other people, right? I mean, look, assignment desk folks are busy, producers are busy. I mean, everyone believes that they're too busy to do other things sometimes. And so what do you suggest, Kerwin, this person do to get help to make this change, whether it's temporary or long-term, to help their team?
So I think, this is an all-in approach. And so what it sounds like is it kind of is not an everybody needs to post strategy. And maybe that's what it needs to be. So, the digital person who is working, if it makes sense to go to the daily assignment meetings, right, or the daily editorial meetings. And so when you leave out of that meeting, the reporters are 9 times out of 10 assigned. So the digital person can say, okay, I need this from you today. Just email it to me, I'll post it, right? Or post it to your account, we'll retweet it, that kind of stuff. So I think that needs to happen. It sounds like there isn't necessarily a manager involved, but hopefully a manager would get involved. And I think that there is a bigger play at, here's why we all need to participate in this. And here's why we all need to take time out of our day to help our digital brand and help our digital efforts.
So do you think this producer needs to go to their manager first to pitch this?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
I mean, I think they do. I mean, but if we go back to, some of those interpersonal skills, hopefully this digital digital producer, has some type of rapport with reporters, right? To say, hey, can you give me an update, right? Or can you tweet out notes from the meeting today, from the school board meeting? So hopefully those interpersonal skills are there that they've developed with other people in the newsroom to kind of ask for that stuff that's related to their job that they're covering for the day, to help fill some of the needs of what the digital staff needs. But really it is a go to the manager and present this change. Here's the change that I'm suggesting. Temporarily, while we have these open positions, we need 2 posts a day from the assignment desk, 2 from each reporter, 1 at the beginning of the day, 1 at the end, so on and so forth. Show producers as well, if they find a cool story, that fits into our strategy, they need to post, write, tweet, whatever that looks like. But yes, it is a temporary change, but it should go to a manager to make it more effective.
I mean, I guess if I'm on the assignment desk or if I'm a reporter, I might respond by saying, oh no, I'm not getting sucked into that, because next thing you know, you're going to want me to do this all the time. And so, that the resistance there is inevitable, probably, when you start asking people to do things that they don't normally do, is what I'm guessing.
Well, and so that is why I think that there probably needs to be a bigger conversation with a manager involved about this shift that we need to have, that my job is just listening to scanners and dispatching crews, right? This change that my job is to file a package, this change that as our business has changed, as our audience has changed, and how our audience consumes us has changed. We've got to change in the production of this information. We've got to change in how we get that information out. So I think that is a part of the narrative of change that's got to happen with staff.
Okay, I have another one. I went kind of out of order here, so I went to case number 2 first, but I'll go to case number 1 next. I have here that a TV anchor is concerned her newsroom has been reacting slowly to breaking news. She believes it's just taking too long to put breaking news on the air. If she has an idea on how to fix this problem, walk us through what steps she should take to improve getting breaking news on the air faster.
So I think a little bit of it depends on the dynamic or the situation. She thinks it's taking a little too long to get breaking news on the air. Is that because we have to write the breaking news for the anchor, or can we tell her in her ear 2 sentences and she goes with it, right? So I would kind of look at or try to figure out what the process is for getting breaking news on the air. It is confirmed by the desk, confirmed by a reporter, confirmed, by an anchor, confirmed by somebody on our staff that confirms information. What does the process look like? Are we waiting until we get the breaking news OTS loaded? Are we waiting until, we get it scripted and nice and pretty and buttoned up? Or are we just going with it? Or is this one of those things where, okay, breaking news, school evacuated, and we're all kind of sitting around, versus, okay, stop what you're doing. This is the big story today. Everybody move. Reporters hit the door. The other story you're trying to set up is not going to happen today. I think that's some of the initial question and answer that I would try to figure out, and then give a solution from there. And some of it could be that you just have a slow producer, right? It's slow at, getting breaking news in. So I think those are some of the questions that I would ask or try to look at. What is our process for breaking news to try to glean, how can we get quote unquote faster at breaking news?
Okay, Shalita, it looks like you're back on video. Well, you never were here, but what are your thoughts on this case here? An anchor is concerned that breaking news is not getting put on television fast enough. She wants to make a change. Where should she start? Your mic is off. Are you muted?
Okay, I think I'm gonna have to do.
Yep, I got you now. Go ahead.
Okay, alrighty. So what I would say, this is actually something that we are dealing with or have been dealing with in our newsroom. And we are the breaking news station. So making sure that we just get it on. So we had to go through of like, it can't be pretty, because we were just so used to having everything so buttoned up with breaking news. And I don't know if it was an anchor who went or just the news director who felt like, okay, what in the world is going on? Just get it on. So I would say to that anchor, you know, have a conversation with your producer. Find out, like, okay, what is the slowdown that's preventing us from getting the breaking news on? And if the producer is not receiving this conversation well, then I would say, okay, it's time to have a conversation with your news director to see what is going on. Why is this happening? This is not what we are known for. So, you know, what can be done? Is there anything that I can do? Does the anchor need to make sure they have the assigned file up and say, hey, I'm seeing this breaking news, you know, are we good with going with it? Or, you know, just the conversation with the producer and the anchor. Because having that relationship between the producer and the anchor is super critical to making sure that everything goes off without a hitch for each newscast. So I would first encourage that, you know, having that conversation with the producer, and then if it's not going anywhere, then take it up to where you need to go, because you can't miss breaking news. That's what we do.
Yeah. Is there a risk in being a change agent in a newsroom? I mean, I know being a change agent is a good thing because you're constantly trying to improve the organization and you want to make things better, but there is a risk involved, right, Kerwin? What's the risk?
I mean, as a manager, you know, that risk can be, you know, your perception to either the perception of the establishment or perception of those who have done it a specific way for a while. They may resent that or be upset that you're coming in trying to change things, right? Or who does he think he is? I don't ever think that being a change agent is a bad thing. I think that it's important that you have purpose behind change. Like we aren't changing just to change, but we're changing because we're trying to reach a goal of ours, or we're trying to become more efficient, or we're trying to save money. You know, so we aren't, you know, using this stringer anymore, you know, or using this artist in the courtroom anymore. So I don't ever think that it's a bad thing to be a change agent. I just think that as a change agent, it's got to be smart and it's got to make sense, right? And sometimes it might not make sense to the room. And that's what we talked about earlier. You kind of know, okay, it's time to cut bait on this idea. So I would say no. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to be a change agent.
Shalita, what are the risks involved? I mean, you can't just walk into a newsroom the first week or first month and say, okay, I don't like this, right? I mean, is there a risk involved in sharing ideas and pitching changes?
Absolutely. You definitely cannot go into a newsroom first week, first month, you know, saying, hey, look at me, I'm going to come in here and change everything and I'm going to make it all better because, you know, I am me. No, you can't do that. You have to learn the lay of the land and understand that when you do pitch ideas, when you do come with, okay, I believe this can be better because of A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, that you do run the risk of, you know, people looking at you kind of crazy. However, if Kerwin talked about having that buy-in earlier, if you are able to maximize your relationships with your coworkers, and, you know, really get them to buy into the ideas, then being a change agent is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're showing that, you know, we're changing this, or I'm presenting these ideas so that we work smarter, not harder, you know, that this saves the company money, that this lessens the load, then people will buy in and they'll look at you as like a hero or a shero. Hey.
You make a good point. You know, I tell people you can't pitch changes for it to be self-serving, right? You know, you can't make suggestions because it's only going to make your job easier. I think one way to to have success is to pitch it so that everyone sees how everyone benefits from it, right? I mean, it may not be a direct benefit, but it could be an indirect benefit from your idea. And so I think that's helpful too. I have 2 more questions. We have 10 minutes left, it looks like. And just to all the people who are still here, you can continue to ask questions if you'd like. So I have a couple more questions here for the panel. Kerwin, can you think of a change that you pitched and implemented effectively? And what was your strategy? How did you go about pitching that change? Anything you could think of recently?
Sure. I will, one of them was our two separate meetings here that we have dayside. So one is a morning editorial meeting, starts at 9:30. So when I got here, we were having that meeting in the newsroom, kind of gathered around the assignment desk. And it was just kind of all over the place. I mean, you had people who were walking through, stopping and talking to people who were in the meeting. You know, you had people who were in the meeting who weren't paying attention, who were watching TVs in the newsroom. You know, scans were blazing, and it was just all over the place. And so finally, you know, I said to our managing editor, our news director, I was like, that meeting is a high holy mess. Like we need to move into the conference room, and it needs to be produced better, you know, and we need to start off with, you know, some of the things that are important to us. So, you know, we molded around a little bit, and then I typed up an email that would go to the entire newsroom and that would invite everybody to come, because that was part of it too, is that, you know, everybody wasn't even coming to the meeting that was in the middle of the newsroom, and say, you know, here's the date. And then I laid out how the meeting should go. So we would start the day with, and it has evolved since then, you know, we would start the day with weather, digital, you know, what are the digital highlights, you know, what's popping on social media. And then we would do a win for the day. Like we would celebrate something from the previous day, whether it was a great story, whether it was an exclusive, whether it was a great number. And then we would go into reporter pitches and then what was on the daily grid. And we moved into that. And the first day was a little rough. It was a little long. You know, people were kind of talking and not succinct. And then we got into a rhythm. And so that was a win. That was change. And then my news director was like, this still isn't working. You know, and so we have since revamped that meeting again. And we had a similar meeting at 2:30, which we call a rundown review meeting. And when I got here, it was the anchors, the afternoon anchors would come in at 2:30, and then they would talk to the 5 o'clock producer, and he would be at his computer kind of talking about what was in the show in the newsroom. Nobody was really paying attention. He was still eating lunch. You know, the promotions person was coming. I was like, look, that's not working either. You know, we need to get all in the room, and let's pull up the rundowns, and let's look at it, go through it line by line so that anybody can ask questions. We can see where things are placed so that later on, we're not like, why did that run at 5:30? It should have been at 5:15. It's like, well, you know, we talked about it at 2:30. And so that is going well for us. And it's probably one of our better run meetings now because it's focused, right? So we took it out of the newsroom where there were a lot of distractions, and we said, hey, here's who needs to come. You know, we'll be on point. Here's what we'll do. Same thing every day. Meteorologist goes first, 5 o'clock producer goes, 6 o'clock producer goes, and then we talk about some digital shows that we do with the anchors in our digital team, and then we're out.
Yeah. Shalita, any successful changes you've pitched, and what was your strategy?
Well, just mentioning the 2 o'clock meeting and me leaving it, that was one of the things that I was able to help, not only for myself, but it speeds up the process for our 5 and 6 p.m. producers. So we all benefit, because if I'm not in there taking up time, then they can pitch their stories. So, you know, like any newsroom, that 2 o'clock, 2:30 meeting, they pitch their rundowns, you know, whatever changes that needs to be made can be made. And it just makes everything go by a little quicker, you know, that afternoon meeting. So that's one of the things. And then when I wasn't working in Atlanta, this is so simple, but it was not implemented. I was at another station as a morning EP, and they actually didn't have like an on-call schedule. So that seems so simple, right? But, you know, we were running into where you're calling every producer to see who come in on the weekends. No, let's have a schedule. Let's let that rotate. And it worked really well because then everyone knew, like, okay, I'm on call this weekend. Okay, I'm on call that weekend. If I have something to do, I can change and switch. So that seemed really simple, but it's something that I was able to implement, and I guess they still have it today at that station.
Great. We have 5 minutes left. I just want to get your final thoughts on, just what are some of the do's and don'ts? Just what are some takeaways you want people to get from this webinar as they go back to their newsrooms when it comes to becoming a change agent, of mistakes to avoid, and just some final thoughts, and then I'll wrap it up at the end. Shalita, let's start with you.
Okay, sure.
Your final thoughts.
So being a change agent doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get the glory or whatever, but think of the greater good. How does this affect the greater good? What improvements will this make? How will this ease the workflow? Is it worth it? Making sure that you're going in when you have these ideas, as I said before, get some allies in the newsroom, especially if you have your allies, so that you have someone to bounce ideas off of to see, okay, will this work? Has this been tried before? How do we go about even implementing this change? That will really help, because that will save you some time. It'll save you some stress. It'll save you a lot of stuff. We're all doing, every newsroom doing a whole lot more with just fewer people. So anytime we can bring something that will make the process easier or faster or just more effective, it's a good thing. But be ready that in some cases you're going to have pushback. That's when you don't just bring the problem, but you also have your solution.
Thank you. Kerwin, any final thoughts?
I think we've talked about it is when you are becoming a change agent, have a plan, right? So if you think that something needs to change or suggest it, do the legwork, do the research, whether it's online, whether it's researching with some of your allies. Have a plan to say, hey, this isn't working. I think that we should do it this way, and here's why.
Yeah, I was writing some notes down as I listened to the both of you, and I'll add a couple of things here. One of the first things I like to do is just study your newsroom. Study the culture of your newsroom. It's so much harder to change culture than it is, a system or to fine tune something. So is to change your pitching, is it a major overhaul of a system or culture? And if that's the case, you might have a lot more work to do. I also recommended that, you mentioned this, Shalita, you said have allies, and that's so important. Study relationships, study who the players are, know where the power is in your newsroom, know where the influence is in your newsroom. The power and the influence may not even be with the news director, right? It may be with an EP or an assignment editor. So, yeah, I just, those are just a few things I thought of off the top of my head as I listened to the both of you. Let me check to see if there are any more questions here, and then we're right on time. Look at that, producers getting off on time, right? We have a hard out, so we don't.
Absolutely, we stick to our time.
We don't play, or else we could just go to, there are no more questions. So I just want to thank, we have 13 people on right now. We had almost 20. So thank you everyone who is here listening. We have Denisha, John, Cars, I think Megan, and we have a couple of people listening by phone. So this webinar will be posted to the NABJ website for review. Kerwin and Shalita are very easy to find. Are you on social media? Can you just quickly share your Twitter so people can follow the both of you, and then we'll say goodbye.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Kerwin, KERWINSP and the number 8. Kerwin SP8.
Kerwin SP8 and Shalita.
I am on Instagram as well, and Twitter. One Shalita at WSB, and I think the other one is Shelly Sapphire. So yes.
All right. Thank you both for taking time out. I know it's been a busy news cycle with coronavirus and all kinds of other the primary and the election. So thank you all for taking time out. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye.